In the midst of all the political news this week, I don't know if you noticed it, but there was an item in the news about archaeologists in Czechoslovakia finding a gay caveman, or one they think may have been a gay caveman. I know it's kind of hard to think of Fred Flintstone in that category, but leather outfit, piece of the tree carried around. 2,800 years old. Wonder what LGBT life was like back then. They didn't have texting, didn't have 39th Street, didn't have Cathedral of Hope, but with all those big sticks, they could still go clubbing. Well, you're supposed to tell a joke at the beginning of some sermon, so. Now we'll talk about the sad part. No. I could almost change the title of the sermon today, because as I reread this passage from the gospel, this is always read during Lent, not every year, but every few years, and it's often read at people's funerals. And of course, usually when we hear the story of the raising of Lazarus, the whole point is resurrection. The very first time I preached to this congregation, I set aside the lectionary and chose this passage because it was one of my favorites, is one of my favorites. Because one of the lines in the story that has always intrigued me is that very last one that Jesus says to the crowd when after Lazarus has come forth and he's still bound up in his grave clothes. And Jesus turns to Mary and the crowd and says, "Unbind him and set him free." But there's another passage that has always intrigued me ever since I was in 4th grade. In 4th grade Sunday school, we had one of those teachers that taught in a regular public school during the week, and she liked spelling bee type things, so she had these Bible quizzes. She'd line us up, half of us against one wall over here and half on the other wall over here, and she'd alternate calling on somebody from each line, and she'd have these Bible questions, like, who's the oldest man in the Bible? Methuselah, yeah, okay, point for that team. Who was Jesus' mother? Mary, etc. And one of the questions was, what is the shortest verse in the Bible? Jesus wept. Yeah, Jesus wept, right there in the middle of this passage, which is stunning given the way John portrays Jesus. In Matthew, Mark, and Luke, Jesus shares his emotions. He gets sad, he gets angry, he gets righteous, he even gets violent. But in John, he just kind of marches through his ministry almost in a stoic fashion. At the crucifixion in Matthew, Mark, and Luke, it is in their accounts that we hear Jesus asking for help, asking for the wine which will drug him so that he feels less pain. It is in Matthew, Mark, and Luke that we will hear Jesus saying, my God, why have you forsaken me?" But none of that is in John. In John, there he is on the cross saying, "I've accomplished it." Pretty cold. So it's hard to imagine the way John likes to portray Jesus that we would hear of any sort of emotion. On the other hand, we might not ought to be surprised that he shows it here at the grave of Lazarus, because more than once in the Gospel of John, the Gospel writer tells us that Jesus was close to Lazarus and close to Mary and Martha. In the other three Gospels, during his ministry, he visits Jerusalem one time. In John, he visits 4 times, and he stays each time in Bethany with these friends of his. I'm only human. To err is human, to forgive, divine. Oh, don't mind her, she's always like that. She's only human like the rest of us. Well, yeah, I've had a few messed up relationships, but you know how humans can be. We always seem to see humanity as somehow short of goodness. We're only human. We're merely human. We're just human. Human beings go around making mistakes. Only God does things that are perfect. Only humans go around showing their emotions. Now, I'm not really big on creeds and confessions and catechisms, but one of the things that I've noticed in the Nicene Creed, one of the earliest creeds of the church, is that it says that Jesus was fully human and fully divine. And in the creeds and confessions of our own UCC tradition, those words, that concept is repeated over and over again. Jesus Christ is fully human and fully divine. At the new membership class on Thursday night, I was explaining the evangelical synod tradition within the UCC, which comes from South Germany, where my family came from. And the emphasis there was on a Christocentric theology, that you could interpret everything through Christ. Indeed, those who fought the Nazis inside the church in the 30s and 40s started not with a broad concept of God, but who is Christ and what does Christ mean to us? So what does it mean to talk about Jesus as fully human and fully divine? It's pretty easy for us to latch onto the fully divine Jesus, at least theologically. We're not sure what we want to do with that fully human Jesus that cries at the grave of a friend and gets up in the morning and goes to the bathroom. Oh my God, the Savior of the world going to the bathroom? I remember in seminary actually getting into an argument with classmates about other things that happen to people's bodies because they're human. But that's what it means to be human. Oh no, we can't have any of that. He was fully divine, you know. We might learn from the Eastern Orthodox. They like to point out that Jesus had to experience every feeling and every emotion in order to bless all of it. All those desires, all those feelings, all those urges, all that anger and happiness and sadness and joy. He had to experience all of that, they say, so that it all might be consecrated. What do we do with the fully human, fully divine Jesus? For me, if you take that definition of Jesus being fully divine and fully human, one of the implications of that seems to me pretty obvious is if you want to know about God, look at Jesus. Do you find rejection there? People talk about God rejecting people all the time. Well, he rejected people who mistreated the marginalized. He rejected people who mistreated the poor. I'm not even sure that he really rejected them. He denounced them. But he accepted people that all those other images of God that we have bandying about in our minds, those images of God don't accept a lot of things. So if you want to know about God, we would claim in our tradition, look to Jesus. But we forget the other side of